Welcome back. Well, let's get some perspective on what could have been some of the causative factors. You never know. Well, now we're joined by Dr. Mrs. Uju Agomo, who is the founder and director of PRAWA. PRAWA is a security, justice, and development-focused non-governmental organization with regional, continental initiatives in several African countries. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well, speaking about the custodial centers, we've always raised concerns about the nature of those custodial centers, which may have been a springboard for these kind of issues, but it appears to be systemic because several ministers of interior, the judiciary, several concerns have been raised about it, but it still appears as though either we're not doing enough or not doing anything at all. So you've been involved in this area. Tell us about what you've found.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's indeed quite saddening because we have a lot to motivate us to do the right thing. And just to make a case around this, I want to just mention to you that, on the 31st of July 2019, the president signed into law the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019. And that law provided a lot of things that if we have taken steps to activate, we will not be where we are. I would just let you know. So first you have the issues around the facilities, what needs to be done to fortify the facilities, and they're quite clear. Then you also have the issue relating to the kinds of persons who are in custody. So you will have a very high number of persons who have not been convicted. We have overcrowding in over 30 facilities out of the 244 across the country. Almost everyone that is located in a cosmopolitan or urban area is overcrowded. Then you are also talking about a process that have not clearly distinguished the different categories of inmates and ensure that not only the facility, the structure, but also the regime, the treatment, the programs in those facilities are aligned to the kind of inmates and the kind of risk those inmates present. I'll give you an example. When I talked about the issue about what the Nigerian Correctional Service Act have indicated and why, as a nation, we are doing what we are doing to ourselves. I just don't get it. Now, I'm going to read for you Section 28 of that Act. Section 28 of the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019. It says, there shall be provided monitoring devices to protect, control, and safeguard correctional activities, including observatory towers, double perimeter walls, closed circuit televisions, body scanners, e-monitoring devices, electrically activated alarm systems, and other instruments of restraint. Sub 2. The Correctional Service shall establish and maintain a fully equipped armed squad, intelligence and investigation unit to enhance security, surveillance, monitoring, intelligence gathering, and protection. And sub 3, which is the last I'll read here. In deploying the facilities under subsection 1, priority shall be given to the security requirements of maximum security custodial centers. So I think what we ought to have done is that every maximum security facility, every facility that do harbor high-risk offenders or high-risk detainees should really be equipped according to these sections that I have read to you. Section 28, sub 1, sub 2, sub 3. And why are we not doing it? Even now, We should create a state of emergency now and ensure that the needful is done. If you have control towers, those control towers are supposed to be manned 24 hours. And intelligence should be connected on a minute-to-minute basis. I had some discussion a while ago about the need to be careful, even in terms of the Ashore Rock, in terms of so many other things. And I think as a nation, we should ensure that this is done and done ASAP. This is a trigger, but let this trigger teach us something. So if you talk about overcrowding, you need to be able to take the inmates that are high risk, put them in the right places so that the adequate processes for that type of inmate will be put in place. That's not happening everywhere. And the judiciary, the police, the other players within the justice system should fast track this process. If you look at that same Nigerian Correctional Service of 2019, it also tells you clearly what you should do for those who have not been convicted. It also tells you what you should do to control the overcrowding level of that every facility. Section 12, subsection 4 to 12 of that same act. So on one angle, you have issues about overcrowding. You have issues about high number of persons who have not been convicted, awaiting trial, persons who have stayed very long, and of course getting more angry. You have overutilization of imprisonment. You have the whole part 2 of that Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019 that stipulated clearly the non-custodial sanctions, and we are not utilizing that enough. Imprisonment should be as a very last result. So you can see all of these factors playing together. But again, let this anger, let this fear, let this particular situation make us to wake up as a nation and do something ASAP.
Put it, for instance, one of the things that comes to mind on that one is, so we have the law. We have, we know that the National Assembly has their job cut out for them, and they did what they are expected to do quite well. Is that to say that there wasn't really a plan to execute that law that was put out? Because I expect that because they knew, the right thing to do and the position it accordingly in that law, there is some recommendation that should have gone, especially maybe to the House committee or Senate committee that's supposed to be supervising that function.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, and I think this have almost become a pattern in this nation. That on one angle, and you take it all around, you have very good laws and you talk about the implementation, okay? So you're right. The law have been put in place since 2019, for God's sake. Since July 31st of 2019. You need to be able to activate the implementation of that law. So within that law, it says you needed to create, okay, I'm just giving an example. So you have the custodial arm and you have the non-custodial arm. The whole part 2 talks about the non-custodial arm. The same law talks about establishing a new directorate, such as the Directorate of Non-Custodial and the rest of that. Now, at the moment, as much as I know, no single penny has been released to implement the non-custodial components. I mean, how can we do a thing like this to ourselves? Because the establishment of the non-custodial arm, what it did was to provide a holistic spectrum for supervising those who you may call those who are at risk. Because what it did was to have the custodial officers who would then attend to these persons while they're in custody, for those who need to be in custody. Whilst you have the non-custodial officers who would then supervise those persons who, one, have been sentenced to non-custodial services in the community, as well as those persons who have been either released from custody, but you see that there are also persons that needed to be further rehabilitated or reintegrated and things like that, and followed up and monitored. So it is important. Even the staffing, even the necessary logistics to make this work. So how can we have something that clearly prioritizes security? And he didn't say do it for all the facilities. He said prioritize that for these maximum security facilities. And then you have other types of facilities, including open farms and all the rest of that.
Just a second.
Yes.
You seem to be drawing, connections to various ministries, departments, and agencies. There's a function for the National Assembly. They seem to have done that, but it's not just to make the law, but they're also supposed to oversight. And then you also
and also bring money. And also, yeah.
Okay, well, so you've also drawn the fact that, okay, maybe the Ministry of Interior have their job cut out in that same law. Their own component seems to be lacking. Can you give us an overview or maybe some kind of timeline or a line of activities that ought to take place to ensure that such a thing that we are talking about now should never even have been spoken about in the first place? This is not the only one. We have had several, and from speaking with a former DSS official this morning, he says if we're not careful, within the next few weeks or months, we may have another experience. So, in order to avoid this, which ministries, departments, or agencies, including the National Assembly, should get up off of their butt now and get going?
Okay. I think the best way to look at it is to tell you the key things that need to happen. And you see, and I think part of what we must see is we must put ourselves in a mode of what I call a whole of society approach. So you have a whole of government approach, but you have a whole of society approach. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So let me start from the whole of government approach. Within a whole of government approach, you understand that there is a role, for example, the justice institutions that fall within the justice system. If the police are arbitrarily arresting people, then having more persons who ought not to be there in that place. If you have prosecution that is not being done diligently, you have judiciary that is not fast-tracking the trials of those who are before it. You then have a backlog of persons who are in custody who need not to be there. Section 12, as I mentioned to you, is one thing that should trigger an early warning system. So in that section 12, it says every facility that have exceeded its capacity, every facility in Nigerian Correctional Service has designated capacities. So, and it says within 1 week that the officers in charge, the superintendent in charge, or the state controller should immediately activate an early warning process, which means notify these relevant bodies, including the chief judge of the state, including the attorney general of the state, including the chairman of the prerogative of mercy for the state and all that, to say, listen, we have a problem here, we're sitting. And there are certain things those persons are supposed to do, including diverting more buying offenders out of the facilities and all, out of the criminal justice system and all the rest of them, so that they can serve non-custodial. Now, if you do that, what you do is, if you activated that section 12, subsection 4 to 12, what those agencies in the justice system would have achieved is that they will provide a situation where you will have fewer persons who really need to be in custody. Those persons who need to be in custody will enable the correctional officers to have more opportunity and time to concentrate in engaging with these people. Now, if you hear that over 70% of those in custody have not been convicted, because if you have not been convicted, what happens is that the process of reformation, rehabilitation becomes very challenging for you, because one, nobody knows how long you're going to stay. And therefore, it will be difficult to make a proper plan for you. Now, another implication around this is that it will be difficult to transfer you from a facility that is overcrowded to a facility that is not overcrowded, because the Controller General has that power to do that. Transfer anybody from one facility to another within the country. At the zonal coordinator, the SCG can do that within the zone, and the state controller can do that within the state. So that shows you that people within the justice system need to do something. Within the core security sector agencies, the issue of intelligence sharing, the issue of building synergy becomes critical. Now, you tell me, why will we not ensure that these equipments are put in place ASAP? If you go to any
sounds like a lot of responsibility, madam, and you know, we can't talk enough about the National Assembly's responsibility to oversight. Speaking of which now, have you seen, particularly because we've had quite a number of jailbreaks, have you seen enough of oversighting to lead to all of this supervision and details that you've talked about? And perhaps if you haven't, has it got anything to do with budget? You know, you would see National Assembly members oversighting other ministries and agencies that appear to be more lucrative. So does it have to do with budgeting?
Yeah, that's one part of it, you know, but in terms of the oversight, but also remember the issue about budgeting. So, for example, not just the budgeting for the oversight, but budgeting to implement what you have put in place in the law itself. So that needs to be done ASAP. But in terms of oversight, it also needs to be done. The same act, and there's a reason I keep taking us back to this act, because we already have the enabling facility to make this working. Section 21, Section 22 of those acts talks about 3-4 different levels of oversight. None have been activated. None have been activated. So we cannot continue like this. And I am thinking that this is really an emergency.
Sadly, we lost connection through to Mrs. What's her name again? Uju Agomo, and she said a lot about, you know, the maximum security prisons and the need to transfer, you know, prisoners appropriately, depending on, you know, the category of their crime. I was going to ask her, you know, why keep high-profile criminals in the first place in medium security prisons instead of maximum security prisons where they truly belong?
Well, you know, all of those questions, many, you know, more so now that the president visited the area. So many are waiting to see what will the president do about this. Don't forget, his advanced party was attacked. So that is supposed to be something he cannot afford to take with a pinch of salt or with levity this time out, because many are looking to see. And it's not just because of him, because of the office he occupies. It's the office, basically. Because if that office is disregarded or treated in that manner by those people or by whoever, that speaks a lot about how they will regard the country.
Emboldened.
Yes, and they're all watching from wherever they are. They're taking cues. You remember, I don't know how the word just keeps coming to me that certain people seem to be testing certain things at certain point in time.
Well, it's not a secret, what you say.
So,
it's not a secret.
It's
I mean,
there.
I haven't heard of an attack on any part of Abuja since, what,
2014?
14? and don't forget, Chamberlain, if you remember, there have been a number of people who've been saying, let's not pay lip service to this. Abuja is vulnerable. Remember, a good number of people have told us, look, they're attacking, you know, there are spots of, you know, all of these activities, insecurity activities around Abuja city. And now this is like really close home. How many kilometers away is it from Asoro?
Remember we discussed it here too, the so-called directive, so-called because, I mean, we're trying to see if there's any truth to it, that the minister in the FCT or the ministry of the FCT was trying to direct people to what? Shut down by 7 p.m. And we did say, wait a minute, so if that happens, isn't that going to be some sort of cover for some of these activities to happen? And before long, this happened.
And even if that, there's a reconsideration about that closing time of businesses in Abuja, do those residents now have a sense of safety to work beyond that time?
The thing is, remember the president of the Senate was there, and he said they told him, so they can't afford to lie to him. I hope. Because they
About
said
300 people.
300 people.
terrorists.
How can 300 terrorists, well armed, and you know when you talk about terrorists, you know the weaponry they go with. How can 300 of them be walking the streets of Abuja, the nation's capital?
Walking. Underscore that. Underline that. Walking.
Whatever they even used.
No. That's important to underscore. They were walking on foot. Please underscore that. They were walking. Where were the security operatives? So no one saw anything.
What vehicles did they come in? Did they come in motorcycles?
Bukola, they were on their feet. Is there a different way to say walking? That's what they told the president of the Senate. All right, so Who saw something and didn't say anything? One. Two, you raised the issue of the residents. Mr. Adetayo said something that we should pay attention to. It wasn't just the terrorists that were released. Murderers, thugs, and
rapists,
all the
arsonists,
miscreants of society. Who are they going to go after? The very people who testified against them, or the very people who reported them. How safe are those people now?
And they had demanded that they wanted these people to be released, the terrorists. They knew where they were, and then this happened.
And Chamberlain, you kept saying, during the break that there's going to be another attack, and Mr. Adetayo emphasized it. He, in fact, shared intelligence about Kogi, and he said Kogi also bears high-profile prisoners. So the security architecture of Kogi prison, is it being reviewed right now? Who's, taking a second look at the Kogi prison, such that any attack on that correctional center will be forestalled?
Well, Chamberlain, we have to.
Okay, let's go to those messages.
We need to thank Dr. Uju Agomo, President of International Corrections and Prisons Association. We couldn't really do that properly, but a number of messages. You want to take the first one, Chamberlain?
Okay, let me help you. Go ahead.
Olumide Enoch Moye says about the Kuje prison invasion. Is it possible in modern-day Nigeria that 48 hours after the attack and knowledge that over 60 inmates escaped, we do not have the tabloid, press, or TV media houses publish photographs of the escapees, and the Controller General is still in office? Now we have a retired AIG telling us to be on the lookout in the outskirts of Abuja, as these escapees might be seeking manual labor for survival. And so we should activate our body language sensitivity to identify the escapees.
They've not released these things to us. Meanwhile, they're supposed to have BVNs. You can't do anything without BVN, without your name. They blocked your phones. How come these people have phones in cells and nobody can trace them? Nobody knows who they are. We don't know who they are. How come?
Okay.
Activate body language sensitivity. I can't get over that immediately. Okay, let's take this next one from Henry Ewonwu. He says, it's a reasonable suspicion to advance collusion and compromise, given that the CCTVs and other tracking devices are non-functional. Was the facilities management waiting for the FEC to award contracts for their repairs or new procurement? The embarrassment is unbearable. Heads should and must rule. Well, Henry, we're wondering about that ourselves and about so many other things as far as the Kuje, the attack on the Kuje Correctional Center is concerned.
Well, I think we have to call it a day right now. I'm sure that our viewers are, well, maybe not. John Okparacha says the pictures I saw on Kuje, well, I'm sorry I couldn't take that as well. Looks like we're totally out of time. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for watching.
I'm Chamberlain, sir. Goodbye.